Welcome to the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. We've got a fantastic show planned out for you tonight. And my guest at this time, also from PRConnectionsRadio.com, we got Brian Gardner. Brian, welcome to the show. Tell everybody about yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. I do host a show, We Have the Power, and I just started a new show for young people called So You Want to Be a Blank, and it's a show that's designed to help young people to figure out what career path they want to do, especially those coming out of high school. They're kind of shot out of the cannon. Okay, what do I do now, And I had that experience when I was growing up. I talked to my mom and said, I don't know what I want to do. I'm 18. She goes, don't worry, you'll figure it out. That's the only advice I got, and I don't want our young people to have that lack of advice. And so it's going to be an interesting show. I'm going to talk to all kinds of career professionals and say, okay, what is it like to be a private investigator? It's not just the Magnum, the series we see on TV, with Magnum. And, what is it like to be a dentist if you want to run your own dentist office? Do you really want to spend time in people's mouths? Yes, I do. Well, then that's a career for you then, And I'm an award-winning journalist for an article I wrote about a racing show that got published in Auto Week. And I have been a musician for over 50 years, drummer, guitarist. And I have a band now called Manzanita, and we play locally. And I love NASCAR. I don't know what it is. I just love it.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. So, Brian, when it comes to NASCAR, first off, when did you really become a NASCAR fan, and what really drew you to it?
Well, I actually started out watching Ford when they were trying to win Le Mans. That is my favorite track. There's something about that. I've studied the history of the different races there. They've been racing there since 1925 or so. And that's what got me interested, because Ford was trying to beat Ferrari. And it was very exciting when they did. And then I was involved heavily with music and that sort of thing for a couple of years. Once Ford won Le Mans, they downsized the engines. Ford couldn't race there anymore. And so I kind of lost interest in that a little bit. And then NASCAR caught my attention, as it did for many people in this country, when the cars started really looking really good. The sponsors were, even though the sponsors' colors were on the cars just looked awesome. And it was kind of the preeminent racing because of a key thing that I think most people would agree with, even those who may not be racing fans. NASCAR had this way of allowing different drivers to get in the lead, a lot of passing. You had to go in and fill the car up regularly with gas, and they had a regular jack you had to use. Indy cars, you just put a hose on it and the car pops up, And NASCAR kept some of those older ideas in there, which made the pit stops be instrumental in whether the driver got out first and got into the lead. So it was great racing because there was so much passing and you never knew who was going to win. In Formula One today, a lot of times a car will get into the lead and never get past, and they're trying to fix that. But NASCAR was very exciting when I started looking into it because of that aspect. So, in the 80s, in that area, I was really starting to get into it, and I've been a Ford fan for a long time. Doesn't mean if you're a Chevy fan or a Toyota fan, you can't keep watching the show, because we'll talk about everybody, but I am a Ford fan.
And I will say the 24 Hours of Le Mans, one of the most iconic and one of the most historic races of all time. I mean, when you win the 24 Hours of Le Mans, you get, put in history when it comes to racing. So definitely Le Mans is historic. But when it comes to NASCAR, so growing up, I was a Team Chevy fan. I loved the Monte Carlo. They had some of the greatest drivers of all time drive for Team Chevy. And then you had Team Ford as well. I mean, they've had classics. They've had legends as well. So when it comes to Ford, I just always wonder,
Oh yeah.
right now in 2022, who is their guy? Who is really the main, best driver, like, their A driver when it comes to Ford? Like, who is that guy?
Before we started the show, I told you about this chart that I keep. And so far, Joey Logano has won 2 races for Ford. He drives for Penske. So he is kind of, their key driver. Although the one race he won was not a championship race, it was a race that was not necessarily on the championship list. It was the All-Star race that he won. But he has won 2 races regardless. So once again, you take a look at the Penske team, and they're right up there. Blaney has won a race, so has Logano. Cindric has won a race, and those are the 3 main drivers for the Penske team. So the Penske team, once again, is doing well, but all of them are having difficulty with this new car because of the changes NASCAR made to increase even more the ability to pass. These cars have a tremendous amount of air coming off them, and when you get up behind another car, it can cause all kinds of difficulty. Well, they fixed that with a diffuser on the bottom, which channels the air in a certain way, and it allows people to come up behind the car and pass much easier. But to answer your question, yeah, it's the Penske drivers look like they're doing very well.
Yeah,
But Ford
Austin
is struggling
Cindric.
this year.
Yeah, they are. I will say Austin
Ford
Cindric. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, won Daytona. Yeah,
Yeah, he did. I will say
he
he's a
won
bright star
Daytona, and that
in
was
NASCAR. Yeah, I like his potential. I mean, his road
Mhm.
course ability. I think that he's a solid driver on the Ford side. Ryan Blaney has been one of the most
Yeah,
popular guys on the grid. But from a
right.
Team Ford perspective, I know you kind of talked about that, but on the Team Chevy side, I mean, you have seen Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez. I mean, they've kind of come out of nowhere to really be these great drivers in 2022.
Yeah,
I believe that this Gen 7 car has really benefited the medium market teams. They're not small. Trackhouse is not a small team by any means, but they're in that mid level. They run 10 to
yeah.
20th most of the time, and they're winning races. I mean, they've won 3 races so far, and yeah, I like that. That's the one thing about the
I was
Gen
just
7
checking that
car
chart again.
that I love.
Yeah, well, Chevy has run 7 races this year. They apparently have gotten themselves wrapped around the new car better than anybody else because Toyota's only won 4 races. Ford has won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 races, so they're kind of even. But Chevy has won the most races this year.
Indeed, they have. I mean, it might be another
So,
year where Chevy wins the championship at the end of the season, so it'll be interesting to see what
and if you
happens
take a
there.
look at the standings, if we look at the Cup standings, and they're off this weekend because of Father's Day, but if you take a look at the top 10 in points right now, Chevy is 1-2. Third place is Kyle Busch, a local guy here from Las Vegas, of course, in third place in a Toyota. Then there are 2 Fords, Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano. Then another Toyota, Martin Truex, who has not won a race this year yet. Then you have 3 Chevys, Kyle Larson, who was the champion last year, William Byron, and Alex Bowman. And then the last one, top 10, Christopher Bell in another Toyota. So if you add those up, Toyota has 3 in the top 10. Chevy has 5, and Ford only has 2 in the top 10 at this point. So Fords have been having some trouble with this next gen car.
Indeed, they have. They've had some hard
A little
times trying
trouble.
to get the car figured out. So, absolutely. And when it comes to the
Right.
NASCAR season,
Yeah. And I took it. Go ahead.
well, I was going to say, when it comes to NASCAR season, I've also really noticed that there's certain teams that have done better under certain tracks. Like I've noticed with the short tracks,
Oh, yeah.
you've had Hendrick Motorsports. They've kind of dominated the short tracks. When it came to the super speedways, you saw the Fords really be in the front of the pack when it came to the stricter play
Right.
tracks. So it feels like they're all kind of figuring out their own mix there.
Right. And I think it's also very exciting that NASCAR doesn't just have ovals. They have ovals, road courses, they have some street circuits. They have an incredible race up in New York at the Glen. That is a huge track. Very interesting to see them race there. And then they raced at the LA Coliseum, which is such a short track, but people just loved that because everybody could see every moment of that race because it's basically a bowl, right? And they reconfigured it so they could run race in that LA Coliseum, and it was a spectacular move by NASCAR. People who weren't NASCAR fans came to that. They could be so close to the action, and it's not like it was a track like Le Mans where you can only see one portion of it. You could see the entire race, the whole race. Very exciting.
Very exciting indeed. So we're talking about NASCAR here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. We're here with our guest, Brian Gardner from We Got the Power. And staying with NASCAR, you mentioned Kyle Busch a while ago, but there is some great drivers that have come out of Las Vegas, the sports entertainment capital of the world, where this show is being broadcast. Right. You do have his older brother. You have Kurt Busch, who won a race earlier this year, but you also have Noah Gragson, who has actually been this young up and coming driver. He's driven a few races in the Cup Series. What do you think about Noah Gragson? I mean, I think that he is a bright future in NASCAR.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing that everybody's talking about. These young drivers. Now, first of all, you have to understand the pressure they have. They have the pressure from the sponsors. They pay a tremendous amount of money to put their colors and their name on that car. So they've got that pressure. They've got a pressure to say, we have given you a top tier ride, the top series, the Cup Series. And so what's happening is a lot of the younger new drivers are very much more aggressive at passing and bumping people out of the way than the old school drivers who would, find a way to pass without necessarily bumping too much into the person ahead of them. And there's a controversy going on between the younger drivers upcoming who are under a lot of pressure on how they're driving on the track. Because what we don't want to see, even though these vehicles are very safe, these race cars are as safe as they can make them. We don't want to see somebody bumped out of the way and go head on, even into a safer barrier, which has a lot of foam in it and cushions a lot of the crash. So there has to be a balance with these new drivers who are under this pressure not to get too aggressive when they are trying to pass someone. But Noah Gragson, he's up and coming, and so he's going to be under that pressure to win, So.
And I've also noticed from this season, you've had, once again, the younger guys, and they are making, their debuts in the Cup Series. We mentioned Austin Cindric. We talked about Noah Gragson, Zane Smith, who's from California, with one state over. He made his Cup debut last week. So when it comes to NASCAR, you're really seeing a youth movement in today's age. And I want to ask you this, and I want to ask the audience who's watching around the world as well. When it comes to the younger drivers, I mean, you're seeing them debut now at, 19, 20, 21. They're getting younger and younger. Do you think that's a good thing for the sport, the fact that they are bringing in younger drivers?
Has to be, because, we talked about this a couple of days ago, that there is a situation. You look at somebody, like, let's take a look. I took some notes here about some of the drivers. Kevin Harvick is in his 40s, and I want to go over, I have the notes here on the Busch brothers, and, they also are not spring chickens. They're both getting up there, and, if they don't have a new, fresh set of drivers coming in, like, a lot of these drivers are going to start retiring. Like, there's some talk right now that Martin Truex is deciding right now whether he's going to make this his last year. And so there's going to be lots of spots filled because a lot of the drivers we know and love are getting into their 40s and starting to think about retiring.
Indeed, absolutely. We're
So
really starting to see, drivers that we grew up with or drivers that, we've seen throughout the sport. They're starting to find their way out. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, yeah, and the other drivers, you can. I mean, these cars have power steering and different things. You can drive into your late 40s, but once you get into heading toward 50, it is difficult. The cars are hot. You're in the car for 3 hours. It's very mentally taxing. There is some G-force, but they do have the particular seats that help them for their head not moving as much as it's pretty much time to start thinking of retiring. And, you know, so there's going to be a lot of seats available in the next 2 or 3 years as drivers that we have watched for many years start getting the point where they say, okay, I'm retiring. And that's something that's why NASCAR is being very smart. They have the other series. People may not know they have the Xfinity series, which are NASCAR looking cars, but they're a little less powerful. Then you have the truck series, and those two lower series are really good areas where people can start out in the trucks and they can get a lot of experience on the different tracks, move up to Xfinity, and then be looked at by the top teams like, I want that guy, or maybe in Hallie Deegan's case, I want that gal in my car, my truck or my car. So it's important to have new young drivers coming in all the time. It's very important.
I'm glad that you mentioned Haley Deegan because she does have a good following. She has a lot of people backing her, supporting her. And I
Right.
think it's safe to say that over the last decade, over the last 5 years, really, a lot of the fan favorites, a lot of the popular drivers that most, casual fans knew the name of, they're kind of leaving the sport
Right.
now. I mean, you have guys like Jimmy Johnson,
Yeah.
Jeff Gordon, Dale Jr., Tony Stewart. I mean, those guys are all gone now. They've retired. They officially hung it up. And I look at someone like Haley
Yeah.
Deegan, who, she's great on dirt. Don't get me wrong. She's fantastic on dirt late model. She's been doing that for a long time. But
Right.
I look
Right.
at it and I say, when it comes to Haley Deegan, when it comes to Noah Gragson, when it comes to those type of drivers,
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder, is there going to be one
Yeah.
person who could stand out to you? Is there one person, like maybe like a Chase Elliott, who's really going to carry NASCAR into the next era once a Harvick's gone, once Truex is gone? Like once those guys who people are familiar with are gone, like who's going to lead that way?
Yeah, I think that you mentioned Elliott is one that is definitely going to be in there. And you take a look at individuals who who kind of struggling a little bit, but Kyle Larson is an incredible race car driver. He was out for a
Incredible.
while because of something he misspoke. I don't know that he should have been dropped from the team, but we'll not really take that up as much as the fact that he was a champion last year, and he's just really a good racer. So I would say, looking at the standings, Chase Elliott and Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano and Kyle Larson, even though they are not the youngest drivers, those are the ones that are probably not going to retire for another 5 or 6 years. So they're going to be the mainstay. And that covers also, if you take a look at the other drivers you mentioned, Martin Truex may be leaving, but you take a look at some of the other Toyota drivers, Christopher Bell, and some of them that are up and coming. That means all the manufacturers will have good young drivers to continue to fight the fight and get victories.
So, talking about NASCAR here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. We're here with our guest, Brian Gardner from We Got the Power. And you were talking about Ford, and obviously I know that you're a big fan of Ford. And when it comes to the last 5 years, I mean, Joey Logano's won a championship. I know that he did it in a Dodge, but Brad Keselowski, he was part of Penske when he won that title. But out of all the dream manufacturers, Ford kind of has been on the wayside when it comes to winning titles as of late. So I just look at Ford and I go, all right, is it going to be Penske that's going to, have a chance to raise that championship? Like, does it have to be them, or could it be Stewart Haas maybe?
Well, Stewart Haas again has Eric Almirola, who is already said that he is leaving, and he has not won a race this year. He's had some bright spots where he's had a few top tens, but you look at Penske, they not only have the money, but they have the talent. They've got Cindric, who's a new talent, who won Daytona, of course, but they've got Joey Logano, and they have got, the who hasn't won. He's only won one race, Blaney, but those two are powerhouses. They can get the job done. And so I think, again, that team is probably the best hope for Ford, because the other ones are having some difficulties. Keselowski joined the team he joined with Roush, and they've been struggling. Plus, he had a horrible situation of some minor infraction that they took 100 points away from him. That is devastating. He's going to have to win a race to be able to get into the last 10 races, known as the chase, to have any hope of winning the championship. So I think it's going to be Penske is the ones that, if I was a Ford racing executive, I would say they are best hope,
And I'm going to try not to make this next question political, or not try to, make it go a certain way. That's not what we try to do here on the Sports Angle.
Sure.
But when it comes to the NASCAR playoff format, when it comes to the idea that, you have 16 drivers, 10 races left in the season, knockout style format, there is a kind of a division with NASCAR fans. Some of them love the playoffs. They love the excitement. They love the battles. And then there's some that are like the purists, the old school guys. They kind of want it to be like the way it used to be, where, the driver who had the best season, they won the championship overall. So I want your opinion, Brian, and all the people watching around the world as well. Are you a fan of the playoff format? Like, is that something that you actually like, or do you not like it? So what's your opinion?
I do, because let's hold the chase, the final 10 races, off to the side for a moment and just look at the season. You see, it used to be that a driver could hang back for the whole race and then surge to the lead and win. And now with these stages, you see they have these 3 stages in each race. And if you win stages, that helps you in the points to be able to get into the playoffs if you don't win. So what that has done, that is made in the driver's mind, they cannot just hang back and try to go for a win on the last 3 laps. They have got to try to win those stages, which has created more competition. And I think it's fantastic. Now, when you get down to the last 10 races, all the drivers are still racing, but only the ones in the top level are racing for the championship. And each couple of races, I think it's each 4 races, each 3 races, somebody drops down again until they hone it down from the 16 to the 14 to the 12. And so even though someone could win a race during the 10 race chase, what's exciting is seeing that those drivers have to make sure they keep their points up during that race, because otherwise they'll be eliminated. And that makes it very interesting to watch. I think it's really a good format.
And here is where I will respectfully disagree with you, Brian, is that when it comes to the NASCAR playoff format, I've really never been a fan of it, and I'll explain why. Now, you got to understand that this is a hypothetical scenario, but hear me out on this. Let's just say you're the most dominant driver on the grid. All right, you're the most dominant driver in the garage. You've won 10 plus races. You have been the best driver in the field. You go into Phoenix, the last race of the season. If your engine blows, if a driver takes you out, you don't win the championship despite the fact you've been the best driver all year. That just doesn't feel right.
I understand your viewpoint. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. Now, here's my counter to that. NASCAR has done a great job in making it so difficult to win that nobody really gets 10 wins a season. They can have maybe 15 top 10, but the way NASCAR has set it up, it is quite awesome because drivers talk about it all the time, how difficult it is to win. And so that means that it still is on the driver. This is my friendly counter to you. It is still on the driver to try to win those races or finish in the top 10 to get the points so that they're in a good points position if they haven't won to be able to get into that chase. And yes, during those 10 races, if they screw up and they've had a good season, they could be out of it. And I understand your viewpoint.
Absolutely, and as somebody who's been a fan of Ford, I only mention this because Kevin Harvick had that happen to him 2 years ago. He won, I believe, 10 races,
I
and
know.
I think he got taken out at Texas,
Yeah.
and he pretty much got eliminated because he had, I think, one
Mm-hmm.
poor race, which to me just didn't feel right. But that's
Right.
the past.
Right.
Now, when it
Yeah.
comes to
That is
NASCAR and
a
also
situation.
yeah, of course. And when it comes to NASCAR and when it comes to, here being in Las Vegas, sports entertainment capital of the world, we're both here in Las Vegas. Las Vegas Motor Speedway, they have 2 races on the calendar.
Right.
They have that one race that is in the playoff. How often do you go? Do you go to the races very much often?
I went when I wasn't living here yet. My son said, "Hey, it's right around your birthday. Let's go." And I went, and it was fun to be there, be close to the cars. But even though it's not that hot in that time of year, I have to tell your viewers, maybe I don't look it, but I'm 70. Do I want to walk around that many hours outside when I could sit at home and have the great camera angles and the great, you know, in-car camera and all that stuff? So I find that it was fun to go to it. If I was younger, I probably would go to more races at Las Vegas. But for me, it's really enjoyable. I can run to the kitchen on a commercial and get some snack I want, and it's cheaper than that. But certainly NASCAR needs to have spectators come. And if you're a husband with a wife and a couple of boys, what a great time you can have. But for my age, I might go one more time or something, but it's more fun for me to watch these races from home.
Right, get the kick back, crack
Even
open
though
a
I have a
cold
lot of
one.
energy as a 70.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, absolutely. Now, when it comes to NASCAR, when it comes to watching on TV, actually, this brings up a solid question. People have talked about the production value and like the TV side of it and
Sure.
the different angles and everything that you get to watch when you are watching the race at home. So I got to ask you, when it comes to NASCAR and when it comes to the way that it's presented to the fans, do you think that they're doing a good job at that? The way that, they're breaking it down even for like the casual viewer who watches?
I am. The only thing I agree with the gentleman who does another podcast, and that is sometimes they tend to do some goofy little sidebar thing that I think demeans NASCAR. I don't want to see him, I don't know, sitting on the roof. Can I hang on to the roof of the car with you swerving around? Something silly like that. That demeans the sport to me. I'm much more interested when they have the Ford car that they go to show us how the brakes work and show us, well, what are the aerodynamics doing? This kind of stuff is interesting. And I think that there are various commentators who are really good. Some of them are a little flat. Tony Stewart, I think, could just loosen up a little bit. He seems a little bit tense, whereas some of the other ones are a little bit more playful and they give good insights on when you see a driver do a particular move. Hey, the reason he did that is that air is coming off the car in front of him and he lost the nose. They'll talk about that a lot. He lost the nose. And we should mention, so that people who've never watched racing before, I mentioned this to you earlier, and I think it's a very important point and an interesting point. In the 60s, the Formula One cars and pretty much NASCAR and some of the sports cars, but let's talk about Formula One for a minute. They looked like a cigar on wheels. Absolutely. They didn't have any aerodynamics whatsoever. And Colin Chapman, who is the head of Lotus, I don't know if he went to sleep after having pizza or what, but he woke up with the most incredible, simple idea. He said, wait a minute. I want our cars to go around the corner faster than the competition. So let's see. A wing on a plane causes lift. What if I turn the wing over? Now I'm going to create downforce. Do you know the year that he put wings on his car? They won every single Grand Prix race except for one. They only lost one. And now the NASCARs, of course, are the same way. Now, I was watching the Daytona 500, and here's another innovation that NASCAR has come up with. It's about the size of a cereal box, what I'm going to talk about. Bill Elliott was going down the back straight at 230 miles an hour about in front of 30 other cars. And he got bumped. And his car, here, I'll bring up a car here from my collection. His car got turned around this way. Now the car is going through the air this way. And now it started to lift off because it wants to take off like an airplane. And these things called roof flaps opened up, slammed the car back down on the track, and he spun off into the infield. Let me tell you, if he would have crashed into those 30 cars, it would have been a complete disaster. But those simple flaps, about the size of a cereal box, lifted up, pushed that car back down, and he spun out of the way of these 30 cars coming at him at about 200 miles an hour. It's the simplest, most amazing device that every NASCAR has on its roof and sometimes on the hoods too. Amazing, simple idea that has saved lives and just using the air that we all live in a way that helps to keep these cars under control. Fascinating.
And when it comes to those type of innovations, when it comes to safety, a lot of people have noticed that NASCAR has put a lot of attention to safety. They're trying to make the cars as safe as possible for the drivers. And thankfully, there really hasn't been a death in NASCAR in 22 years when it comes to how safe they've been trying to make the cars. And, one thing that NASCAR has done that I definitely appreciate is that they've put more padding on the roll bars. They put more padding, to make sure that it protects the drivers, to make sure that, if they get into a bad crash, their neck's not going to move much. So I will say the health and safety, NASCAR has gone a long way with that. And I just want to ask you, and I want to ask all people watching around the world here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, when it comes to NASCAR, is this the safest they can get? Or do you think that there's a chance they can even go more when it comes to the safety side of it?
Well, what killed Dale Earnhardt, his crash didn't look that bad, but he hit the wall about 190. And if I show you this, if my head moves forward at that speed with that kind of a crash, then this part is able to move, right? And if it's jerked, it breaks your neck right here, and that's instant death. Now, what they have for the drivers is called the Hans device. And basically, in a crash, everything moves together. It keeps your head from snapping. And many drivers have hit the wall at 190, and they have the safer barrier, which absorbs some of the impact. But that Hans device is what has saved drivers. They have more roll bars in the vehicle than last year. They also have the seat that keeps the driver very still. And you'll notice another thing, when the driver's in a crash, they'll pull their hands off of the wheel because that wheel is jerking, getting hit by other cars. And if you're hanging on to it, of course, it could break your wrist. That's just something the drivers do. But if you take a look, let me get my hands up here. This is where the driver sits. And this space in between there can take all kind of bumps and hits, but it stays intact. I was looking at the list of drivers here, and I want to talk about this one accident that Austin Dillon had. So he comes around, he gets around backwards, the car tries to take off, crashes into the wall, comes down, the engine flies off, and then another driver had nowhere to go, hit him, he's upside down, hit him and spun the car around again, and he got out without a scratch. Amazing. And also another driver had a similar accident like that, and he had some difficulty with his neck, but he also survived a terrible accident at Daytona. And I just don't have his name to I'll get his name, the listeners, but the viewers, but it was an amazing wreck, and these drivers have walked away. Now, the other thing is protecting the spectators, because when Austin Dillon's car got launched into that fencing, I mean, this is a 3,500-pound car at 190 miles an hour. And this car was launched into that fence. And a few people were injured. A couple of pieces got through the fence. But that 3,500-pound car could not. It looked like a shark trying to bite through some reeds or something, you know. It did not get through that fencing. It was an amazing example of how safe NASCAR keeps the spectators. Anybody who has a moment to go to YouTube should watch the wreck of Austin Dillon. You know, not to, oh, I want to see wrecks and craziness like that. Just look at the safety of the car, the safety of the spectators, how that fencing held back that car. I still don't know, but it certainly did its job amazingly, you know.
So. And as we're talking about NASCAR here on the Sports Angle at PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media, I'm your host, Daniel Kelly. We're here at Brian Gardner from We Got the Power. And when it comes to taking your hands off the wheel, I actually got to give credit to Danica Patrick for that, because, you know, she's from IndyCar.
Yes.
And with IndyCar, that's where she learned it from. So, you know, I will say with Danica Patrick, she got, a lot of respect. Yeah, a lot of respect. You know, she actually brought that over from IndyCar. And, you know, you were talking about Tony Stewart earlier in the show, and somebody commented this when it came to the SRX racing, which is the new series that Tony Stewart created. It's kind of, you know, a different series than what NASCAR has done. So I want to ask you, just in general, have you heard about the new series that Tony Stewart's created, the SRX series, where he's bringing in, you know, all these drivers from across the world and everything like that? Have you heard about that?
I've heard about it. You've got me with one question I can't answer because I haven't watched the SRX. So I'm not a good one to ask about it. You know, it's just I'm not up on that particular racing series. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. Yeah, I just wanted to ask that because, like, somebody in the comments asked it, and I was just like, you know what? Who knows? Maybe he has, maybe he hasn't. But continuing with the NASCAR side of it, the NASCAR side of it here on the Sports Angle. Now, you've been watching NASCAR for a long time. Obviously, you were talking about Ford, Le Mans, and everything like that. So throughout NASCAR's history, like, who's been some drivers that you've liked watching? Like, who are some drivers that you were a fan of, you know, as throughout NASCAR's history since you've been watching it?
Yeah, I mean, I know that Jeff Gordon, some people liked him, some did not like him. And I was a Ford fan even then, but I enjoyed watching him because he seemed to be decent as far as how he competed with others. Dale Earnhardt was one that would bump people out of the way, so I kind of lied on him. But I really liked Mark Martin because Mark Martin talked about the strenuous work he did to always be physically fit and to make sure that he was always ready for that race. And he would not race anybody too aggressively. The other one that I like almost the best, even though he was a Pontiac driver, was Bobby Labonte, because I saw Bobby Labonte. It was very funny. I saw him interviewed once. He, to this date, I've never seen him say a negative thing about another driver, but they stuck the microphone in his face and they said, "Hey, what about that driver who kind of bumped you out of the way?" And he went, "Yeah, stuff happens. Yeah, it happens." And he wouldn't say anything negative. And of course, he won a championship and brought Pontiac a lot of fame and got them a lot of wins they might not have gotten before. So he's one that I really liked a lot. And Davey Allison was one whose car I think is one of the most attractive. Unfortunately, he died in a helicopter at the track that he was piloting, and it got out of control. But his Haviland car was absolutely beautiful looking car. And he was a fantastic race driver. Really, really quality. So those are some of the people that I have followed. Of course, Mario Andretti won the Daytona 500 and Monaco and the World Championship. And so he is another one and he won the kart championship as well. He's another one that was fun to watch. And it was great that he won Daytona way back then,
Yeah, I'm glad I asked you that question because there are 4 or 5 drivers from when I was a kid that I always loved watching. Jeff Gordon was obviously one of them, the rainbow colors, having the Rainbow Warrior pit crew. It was always fun to watch Jeff Gordon as a kid and getting to see him, really become, this great driver in NASCAR. I liked Ricky Rudd. Ricky Rudd, he always had the Tide car. The 10, the Tide, and all that. And Ricky Rudd was a solid guy. I remember one time he almost passed out at Martinsville because he had no AC in the car. So he almost passed out from heat exhaustion. So when it comes to Ricky Rudd, I respected him. Mark Martin was cool. Don't get me wrong. Mark Martin was a great driver. I liked certain drivers like Davey Allison. But Dale Jarrett was somebody actually I liked a lot. The UPS truck, that was later in his career, but I liked the UPS truck with Dale Jarrett. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And Harrison Burton driving for the Wood Brothers. Now, a lot of your viewers may not know this, but the Wood Brothers were the first ones to dress up all the same. And, man, they were the best of the best of the best in pit crews. And they won a number of championships with different drivers, but they're still racing today. And actually, I want to look at the list again here because there is a driver who's sitting on a threshold of really something big if he could pull it off. Harrison Burton is driving the car for the Wood Brothers, is sponsored by Motorcraft. And they're just waiting him to win the next race because it'll be their 1,000th victory. He's got to pull that off for them. That would just be so awesome,
Yeah, that would be great, man. That would be fantastic if he could pull that off. Gonna move over to the. Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, moving over to the comments real quick, because somebody said like, "Hey, if you want to watch that new racing league, she just put it right down there for you." So this Sunday, if you want to watch their race in Florida, so yeah, she put it down there for you.
Thank you, Lorene. I'll watch it.
And she mentioned that Mark Martin was a great driver. He didn't have to wreck somebody to do it. Clean driver, which is 100% true. He didn't have to steamroll you to win a race.
And he had a nice car too. That Valvoline car looked cool. There's certain, I'm really interested in the different way that they dress up these cars. They get some great looking, fantastic looking themes on the vehicles, and some of them look okay, but some of them are going to go down in history. You just know it,
Yeah, and you mentioned Mario Andretti, which is obviously a fantastic driver, but I actually liked AJ Foyt myself. AJ Foyt, I like the fact that he was willing to do whatever it takes to win. So.
Yeah, I remember one time AJ Foyt at Indianapolis, his mechanics were getting it done. And he comes out there and takes a hammer and starts banging on this car. I'll get it done. He was that rough and tumble. But here's the thing about him. He was paired with Dan Gurney when Ford tried to win Le Mans again in 67. And Dan Gurney was concerned that he would drive the car too hard. He would break the car or whatever. But A.J. Foyt was smart enough to work with Dan Gurney. And at one point, you've got to hear this story. The Ferrari driver was behind the Ford Mark IV, blinking his lights at the driver, hoping that Dan Gurney would speed up, get mad at him and speed up and cause the car to break, from being too rough on it. So Dan Gurney pulled off the road. The Ferrari did the most major sports car race in the world, sitting there glaring at each other, and Dan Gurney refused to leave. Finally, the Ferrari driver just motored off, but he never could get Dan Gurney to speed up and break the car. And guess what? They finished their parade lap. They were going to the winner's stand, and one of the key components of the car, the uprights, broke after the race. If Dan Gurney would have speeded up, that probably would have broke that, and Ferrari would have won that race. Interesting tidbit, huh?
Well, that's incredible, actually. That's a fantastic story.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dan Gurney, he was an incredible road racer as well. I mean, regardless if it was NASCAR or, if it was USAC, no matter what it was, he was a fantastic road racer.
His Gurney Eagle is the most beautiful Formula One car, and he's the only American to ever win a Formula One race in an American car. And that Gurney Eagle, just beautiful. People can Google that too. It's a beautiful Formula One car. And it had a little beak on it in the front that looked like an eagle. I mean, it was cool. It was a cool looking car. He won at Spa. I believe it was 66 that he won that race. And that goes down in history again as the only American driver to win in an American car,
Absolutely. And everybody should definitely go check that out as we're talking about racing here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio with your host, Ian Rakelli. We're here at Brian Gardner from We Got the Power. And I asked, who are drivers that you liked, when it came to NASCAR in the past. Well, somebody in the comments said, who did you not like? Was there anybody in the, racing world? Was there anybody in NASCAR that when you're on the track, you had to boo the heck out of them? Was there anybody like that?
I never really booed anybody except in my mind. I really didn't like Dale Earnhardt's antics. I didn't like it because he would bump people out of the way. I really didn't like Jimmy Johnson. I have a theory of my own, and people can either say, oh, yeah, I thought about that, or they can criticize me. But he won 7 championships, and then NASCAR tightened up the inspection on the vehicles. He couldn't even get a top 10. It just makes me wonder what was really going on there. Because here's another philosophy I have. And any driver that cheats or is thought of as cheating, that trophy they win is worth about 10 cents. I mean, if you cheat to win, what is the honor in that? How can you feel like, oh, I'll put that on my shelf in my man cave? That's really cool. No, you cheated to win. And so that's why Jimmy Johnson, I don't really like too much. I have my own suspicions. Also, going back to Dale Earnhardt, that he would bump people out of the way in a certain way that I thought was not right. Jeff Gordon is fine. He's a Chevy driver, so I never really got him. He won a lot of championships, and he seemed like an honorable person. But just a small note, he did cheat on his wife, and so I kind of gave me a sour taste in my mind about him.
Yeah, there you go.
That's my answer to that, and I'm sure some people will say, right on, Brian. Some people, you stink, Brian.
We'll find out soon enough. There's probably somebody in the comments section. They'll probably tell you if they like you or not from that. But when it comes to NASCAR, actually with Jimmy Johnson, my theory is that when he had that wreck at Pocono, when he crashed, going 202 miles an hour heading into turn 1, that I actually think that's the reason why he struggled the last 3 seasons. I think that wreck kind of ruined his confidence when it comes to the way he drove behind the wheel. Because Brian and the audience is listening around the world, you got to understand that when you get into that type of accident, when you hit the wall at that certain amount of speed, it messes with your mind.
Yeah.
You know, it really affects your mental state.
Yeah.
I remember I remember it was Steve Park. Steve Park, when he wrecked at Darlington, he said like he never mentally recovered from that. Like when he had that head-on collision at Darlington.
Right. 2 things to mention there. We do have the safer barriers, which lessens it, because let's go back to another quick thing. I know we're getting close to top of the hour, but if you're in an accident in a Ford Falcon, a 1960s Ford Falcon, that car doesn't have any crumple zones. It has a lot of metal inside the car. The car is going to crash and pretty much remain in the configuration it was. You might get a dent here or there, but the car is going to take the jolt. Today, people go, gosh, I only had a small speed accident and the whole front of my car collapsed. Yes, I know you're upset, but that means that you did not take the hit. The car absorbed all that energy of the crash, and that's why you didn't get injured, plus the airbags. So you take a look at what Jimmy Johnson went through. He did have the safer barrier, but it is a tremendous jolt. You have to remember, his body is going 200 and so many miles an hour. When he crashes in and stops, the internal organs in his body hit his cavity wall at 200 miles an hour. That's really not good for your internal organs, you know. And the other thing that you have to remember is that when these drivers have this kind of terrific accident, then they're driving the next time, and are they wondering if it's going to happen again? And so it can definitely. Now, you look at the other point I wanted to make. You take a look at, you know, Dale Earnhardt Jr. He finally got out of the sport because the doctor said, look, you've had 3 concussions. You want to have another one? You won't even remember your wife or your kid. And his wife, I'm sure, had a talk with him and said, look, you know, go into sports announcing. You know, do we really want you to have another concussion? So even with all the safety, he still experienced those kinds of injuries, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that when it came to old school NASCAR, I think there was one guy who said that, you know, when it was a concussion, you would just drive the next week. And they kind of applauded Dale Jr. for saying, hey, no, wait a minute. Let me get out of the seat. Let me recover first, and then I'll come back. Like, I remember when he first stepped out of the car, I think in 2012, a lot of people were kind of questioning why he would do it. But I think it was the right decision overall.
Right. Now, maybe a doctor watching can correct me a little bit, but I believe that a concussion is your head is slamming into the interior bone of your head and causing a bruise on the brain. Do I have that pretty much right?
From what I've heard about concussions, what I've heard about concussions, because I do follow hockey and I have watched, you know, a documentary about what concussions can do to the game of hockey. If I do recall, I believe that is how it works. Yes.
Right. And now you can imagine, you know, the brain material is not like my fist here. It is very soft material, and it is a circuitry to allow you to do things, remember things, drive cars, you know, all kinds of activities. So you do not want to have this part organ banged up and up, you know.
And we have about 5 minutes left, you know, in the first hour. Yeah, we got 5 minutes left here in the first hour here at Brian Gardner from We Got the Power. And somebody did mention, you know, Dan Weldon, he did die here in Las Vegas back in 2011, the IndyCar race. Unfortunately, he passed away. And someone mentioned that Formula One is coming back. Formula One's going to be here in Las Vegas next year. I want to ask, when it comes to the open wheel side of it, we have about 5 minutes left, so we'll transition for a second. Are you interested in the Formula One race, considering that this will be the first time in 12 years since the Dan Weldon incident that open wheel will be here in Las Vegas?
Yeah, there's two ways to answer that. The first one is I would love to see those cars because the public will be far enough back where they'll be safe, but you're going to be able to see those cars up real close. Now, you have to understand, they never should have let Indy cars race at the Las Vegas Speedway. It is the wrong race for that because although a NASCAR driver is protected by this 3,500-pound car, if one of those, and what happened to Dan Well, I'm not going to go into the details, but I'll talk about it generally. His car was launched into the fencing, and you cannot survive hitting a fence at those kinds of speeds. Now, they do have the halo in Formula One, and they do have the cockpit piece over the drivers now in IndyCar, but still, I don't know that that device could take that much wallop. But you see, at that track, there is the ability to get up into those fences where there isn't at other tracks. And that's why they shouldn't have probably raced there. And that's why they haven't come back. I think the Formula One race on the flat streets of Las Vegas, with plenty of room for runoff, plenty of room to keep the spectators safe, will be fine. And it should be a tremendously exciting race.
It definitely should be. And like I said, we got about 3 minutes left. So I wanted to pull this up real quick. I thought that this was a real interesting situation. Which can you explain to the audience what this is?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm a big Star Trek fan. I'll make this quick, but I'm a big Star Trek fan. And when it became the 50th anniversary of Star Trek and being a NASCAR fan, I decided I wanted to have my Taurus that I owned at the time become a NASCAR sponsored by Star Trek. And so we had 50 on the hood, 50 on the doors. Instead of my name as a driver, we had Gene Roddenberry because he's the founder of Star Trek. And it had all kinds of other interesting play on words. Instead of Goodyear over the wheel, well, it had 50th year. And we also had dilithium crystals by the gas tank because that's what powers the Enterprise. And let me tell you, I got all kinds of great responses from people. And the license plate was USS NSCR, so USS NASCAR. And I still have that plate to this day. But that was just a nod to the USS Enterprise with a Taurus sponsored by Star Trek to celebrate the 50th year of Star Trek. Really cool looking car, isn't it?
Oh, it's a really cool car, and I definitely will show it more here on the show. But when it comes to the first hour, we got 90 seconds left. So, Brian, I want you to, plug your show, tell everybody where they can find you, and PR Connections Radio.
Yeah, so it's PR Connections Radio. The new show is So You Want to Be a Blank, and that is going to be for young people. We have one segment tape so far, and so we will get those done. I've got 3 more interesting people in particular jobs that want to be interviewed, and it's for young people. If parents are watching, get your young people to watch the show because they will find out information about a particular career they may be thinking about, and they'll get the facts as to whether they really want to go to that career. And then I have a political show that also talks about wanting to get this country so that everybody has an opportunity, and that's called We Have the Power. And that's also on PR Connections Radio.
And what time are your shows? So that way people can find you. Like, what's the time?
Yeah, the time doesn't really matter on these shows because what we do is we do them live. People could try to catch that if they want to. But what's beautiful about the world today is you just go to PR Connections Radio on Facebook and you can watch the shows at your leisure. So we don't really have a specific time that they go live. We don't really have call-ins. So it's better to go to the site there on Facebook or to the website, prconnectionsradio.com.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me on the show today.
The voice of new media. Yes, the voice of new media. Well,
Thank
Brian, it was great.
Yeah, I got to talk about NASCAR for an hour. How good.
Yeah, it's definitely a great conversation and everything. But yeah, Brian, thanks for coming on the show, and we'll try to have you on another time.
Sounds great. Have a good rest of your program.
Absolutely. All right, have a good one.
All right. I'll talk to you later. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'll talk to you later, Brian. It was great having you on.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. And getting into the NHL side here of the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media, the Stanley Cup Final. The Stanley Cup Final between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Colorado Avalanche. It has been a fantastic game number one. However, we will focus more into this series here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. And when it comes to Tampa Bay, when it comes to Colorado, I love the matchup that we have. I love that you have the two of the best goalies in all of hockey, Andrei Vasilevsky, Darcy Kuemper. You have two of the best competing for the Lord Stanley Cup in the NHL. You also have a situation where you have two of the best top sixes in hockey competing against each other. So what we're going to talk about to begin this second hour of the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. An interesting situation is that when you compare the side-by-side, when you compare the top six and the bottom six of Tampa Bay and Colorado, you will actually see how similar both of these teams are. You will see the fact that Colorado and Tampa Bay head-to-head are not as different as they should be. For example, the top six for Tampa Bay, you have Andre Palat, Steven Stamkos, and Nikita Kucherov on your top line. Those guys have had a combined 26 goals in this postseason. When you compare to Colorado, Gabriel Landeskog, Nathan McKinnon, and Valerie Neshkinen, they have had 26. So you have had a very even top line between Colorado and Tampa Bay. It has been fantastic to see when it comes to the Stanley Cup Final. If I had to give an opinion and I had to give you my thought process, I give the edge to Colorado when it comes to their top line. Gabriel Landeskog, Nathan McKinnon, they have been putting up record numbers, whereas, Nikita Kucherov's been doing his thing by himself. But Stamkos and Palat, I believe they could be doing more on the passing side of it. On the second line for Colorado, you have Andrei Burakovsky, JT Kuemper, and Mikko Rantanen on that second line. And when you've talked about impact players for Colorado, Mikko Rantanen, the 25-year-old, the guy who's getting paid $9.2 million, the face of the franchise pretty much out there in Colorado. He's had 19 points in 15 postseason games. He has been incredible. On the other side, you have Brandon Hagel, Anthony Cirelli, and the veteran Alex Killorn out there in Tampa Bay. And outside of Alex, Anthony Cirelli, and Brandon Hagel have been best for business for Tampa Bay. I mean, you have two young guys at 23 and 24 years old who have been a stalwart for Tampa Bay this postseason. You have two guys in Hagel and Cirelli who have kind of been leading the way for Tampa Bay. So if I had to go with the second line, I would favor Hagel and Cirelli over Rantanen and Kuemper. because of the fact that, yes, Rantanen is a superstar, but Hagel and Cirelli have been able to do a lot of things on the ice that are more than just stats. And then on the bottom 6, it actually is an interesting development because I feel like it's a push. I mean, you got Ross Colton, Nicholas Paul, Braden Point, Patrick Maroon, the guy who could win 4 Stanley Cups in a row if the Tampa Bay wins in the finals. You have Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, the veteran who has been with teams like Philadelphia, Colorado, Vegas. He's on the 4th line with Tampa Bay. You have Corey Perry, who's trying to win another championship after he won his in Anaheim. Whereas Colorado's bottom 6, you have R.T. Lehkonen, Darren Helm, Logan O'Connor. You have the young 21-year-old, their former first-round pick in Alex Newhook. You have Nico Strum, who they got at the trade deadline. And you have Nicholas Ube-Kubel, who they got from Philadelphia in a trade. When it comes to Colorado, I'm going to say that their bottom 6 is a push. The third line, yeah, you could say that Ross Colton and Braden Point are better than Lehkonen and O'Connor. But that 4th line, Colorado, Alex Newhook has proven that there's a reason why he was a former first-round pick out there in Colorado. Whereas Tampa Bay has so many veteran leadership on the 4th line. So I'm going to say that the bottom 6 is a push between Colorado and Tampa Bay, where the top 6, however, I would give the advantage to Tampa Bay when it comes to that situation. So the defensive side, I'm not even going to try to go there. Colorado has the best top line on defense. Cale Makar and Devin Taves have been the money makers for Colorado. I mean, Cale Makar leads the team in points as a defenseman. Okay? As a defenseman, Cale Makar leads the Colorado Avalanche in all scoring in this postseason. Guys like Victor Hedman, he has done solid for Tampa Bay, but Cale Makar there's a reason why he was drafted 4th overall 5 years ago. There's a reason why they paid him $9 million at the age of 23. Because they know, Colorado does know, that Cale Makar is going to be one of the best defensemen in the NHL that we've had for the longest time. So when it comes to defense, Colorado has that on lock. When it comes to offense, I say that Colorado has a little bit of an advantage, but you could make an argument that Tampa Bay is the more well-rounded team. And then in terms of goaltending, as much as I like Pavel Francouz, as much as I like Darcy Kuemper, you cannot tell me that Andrei Vasilevsky is not better than Kuemper and Francouz. You cannot tell me that you would rather have Darcy Kuemper over Andrei Vasilevsky in net. Absolutely not. There is no way. I would be looking at you with a confused look on my face if you say that's the case. Andrei Vasilevsky, the last 4 postseasons, has been the most clutch, has been the most dominant, has been the most elite goaltender in the NHL today. You want to know why Andrei Vasilevsky gets paid $9.5 million a year? Because he is that dang good. So when it comes to the Tampa Bay Lightning organization, I give them advantage in net. I give them the advantage in net, and I give them a slight push when it comes to the forwards. But because Colorado, in my opinion, has a better all-around offense, they got the more dominant defense. I have Colorado, and this isn't a spoiler. This isn't an opinion. This isn't an angle. This is what's going to happen. In the Stanley Cup final, I have the Colorado Avalanche winning in 6 games. I have the Colorado Avalanche beating the Tampa Bay Lightning in 6 games in the Stanley Cup final. I have Colorado for the first time in 20 years hoisting the Stanley Cup championship in Colorado. First time in 2 decades, I have Colorado hoisting that trophy in downtown Colorado, having the parade. Maybe this time they won't have a 4-year-old try to sit in the Stanley Cup at a mall. That's a little tongue-in-cheek reference for anybody who gets that. But yeah, so maybe this time the Colorado Avalanche, they're not going to have a family in Denver, Colorado, take a picture with the Stanley Cup. So when it comes to the Colorado Avalanche, I have them winning the championship in 6 games over the Tampa Bay Lightning organization. Now, the rest of the news in the NHL, we got about 20 minutes left here on the show. And the breaking news that came out of the NHL was the head coaching hire of Bruce Cassidy. It was reported very recently that the Vegas Golden Knights have hired head coach Bruce Cassidy to a 4-year, $4.5 million deal. So that's going to be $22 million over 5 years for the Vegas Golden Knights. That's how much they're going to be paying Bruce Cassidy to be their new coach of the Vegas Golden Knights. A lot of people have been calling into this show. A lot of people have been asking, what is my input? What is my angle? Do I believe Bruce Cassidy will be the best coach Vegas can get? What is my opinion on Bruce Cassidy? Well, I'm going to tell you. I believe that Bruce Cassidy is the best coach the Vegas Golden Knights have had in franchise history. I believe that Bruce Cassidy is better than Pete DeBoer. I believe that Bruce Cassidy is better than Gerard Gallant. I believe that Bruce Cassidy is the best hire the Vegas Golden Knights have ever made. Bruce Cassidy led the Boston Bruins to multiple playoff appearances. Bruce Cassidy helped the Boston Bruins achieve long-term success. I believe he can do it here. I believe that Bruce Cassidy will be the best option that Vegas took and the best option that they had to offer. I will make a statement right here, right now, that I will not be surprised if the Vegas Golden Knights make the playoffs next year. I will not be shocked if the Vegas Golden Knights, under Bruce Cassidy, end up going to the Stanley Cup playoffs in 2022-2023. Because Bruce Cassidy is a top 5 head coach. Bruce Cassidy is one of the best in the NHL. So I'm not surprised that the NHL, Bruce Cassidy going to Vegas, is the best decision they could have made. The next hire that happened was on the Philadelphia Flyers end, and that is the Philadelphia Flyers have hired John Tortorella to a 4x4. So the Philadelphia Flyers, with their grit and their toughness, they have hired John Tortorella, the absolute moneymaker himself of John Tortorella. Now, do I like this move? Not really. I believe the Philadelphia Flyers should be looking in the forward instead of looking in the past. I believe that Philadelphia should be going after somebody who isn't stuck in 2010. I believe the Vegas Golden Knights, they've done the right decision. They're looking to somebody who can actually win. The Philadelphia Flyers hiring John Tortorella is a move I don't like. Because John Tortorella, his system, his strategy, it is not meant for the modern era of the NHL. When it comes to John Tortorella, I do not look at him and I do not see how his decision-making as a coach is going to excel in Philadelphia. I'm not going to apologize. I don't see it. I do not see how John Tortorella is going to turn around a Philadelphia Flyers team who has not won a postseason series in 10 years. If you want my opinion, I think that John Tortorella is a chase. just a coach. I really don't see the hype around him. Very similar to Mike Babcock. I've never understood the appeal and the intrigue and all of the aura around Mike Babcock. I mean, I had somebody I talked to a long time ago who tried to hype me up on the idea that Mike Babcock is one of the best coaches in the NHL, and I just listened to it and shrugged it off. Because throughout his entire career, I've never seen the hype around Mike Babcock as same as I've never seen the hype around John Tortorella. Yeah, he's an interview clip note. I mean, he's an interview guy. You can get a lot of sound bites from John Tortorella. But when it comes to being an actual coach, I don't see it working out. I don't see it being a fit when it comes to John Tortorella and the Philadelphia Flyers. I simply do not. The also big news that came out of the NHL world, we're talking about hockey here on Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. The Vegas Golden Knights have traded for Montreal Canadiens captain Shea Theodore. Understand that the Montreal Canadiens, they traded their team captain, Shea Weber, who is on a 4-year deal worth $8.7 million per year. They've traded their captain to the Vegas Golden Knights for winger Evgeny Dadonov. The Vegas Golden Knights are going to have to retain the contract of Shea Weber. They're going to have to keep on the 4 years remaining of Shea Weber's contract, despite the fact that the Vegas Golden Knights know that Shea Weber will never play a game again. Understand that Shea Weber is a big name. He was a huge draw in Montreal. He was their captain for a reason. But Shea Weber is never going to step on the ice ever again. His injury that he accumulated in Montreal, he is never going to be on the ice. He's never going to suit up for the Vegas Golden Knights. He's never going to wear a number 6 Shea Weber jersey. It's never going to happen. Understand that when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights, essentially what they did is trade $5 million of Evgeny Dadonov to get that money off their books in terms of cap space. The reason why they traded Evgeny Dadonov to Montreal to get Shea Weber's contract is because Shea Weber will forever be on long-term IR. Shea Weber will be on injured reserve for the Vegas Golden Knights for the remainder of his 4 years. The Vegas Golden Knights are going to pay Shea Weber his $3 million this year. The Vegas Golden Knights are going to pay the $3 million that's going to be after that contract sets in. Understand the Vegas Golden Knights have no problem paying Shea Weber his base salary because he will never play again. Now, who do I think actually wins this trade? Who do I believe actually went out on top in this deal? Well, I'm going to say that I have the Montreal Canadiens actually getting the better end of this deal. Let me explain to you why I think Montreal actually benefits from this deal. Understand that the Montreal Canadiens, they just got back a 30-goal scorer. Understand the Montreal Canadiens just got a guy in Dadonov who has had 20 goals or more in 5 of his last 6 seasons. Understand that Dadonov will be a solid guy on their top 9. When you put him up with Jake Evans, when you put him alongside Brendan Gallagher, maybe have him be with Josh Anderson and Jonathan Drouin, I believe that Evgeny Dadonov is going to have a great year in Montreal. I would not be surprised if Evgeny Dadonov does what happened with Tomas Tatar. When Tomas Tatar got traded from Vegas to Montreal, he ended up having a career season in terms of goals. I will not be shocked if the 33-year-old Russian Evgeny Dadonov does his career high in goals. Because understand that the Vegas Golden Knights got rid of a guy who could get 30 goals next year. So I'm not upset with Vegas that they traded for Shea Weber. That's not what this is. I'm just pointing out that I believe Montreal got the better end of the deal because they're actually going to be able to play Evgeny Dadonov. Whereas Vegas is never going to have Shea Weber play on the ice again. That was a great move for Vegas Golden Knights. They have enough cap space to be able to keep Jonathan Marchessault and Nicholas Waugh. I respectfully disagree, and I will tell you why. I respectfully disagree on them creating enough cap space to keep both Marchessault and Nicholas Waugh. The Vegas Golden Knights are going to have $2.8 million in cap space. In theory, that's a great idea. All right, in a perfect world, $2.8 million would be enough to keep Marchessault and keep Waugh. The problem is $2.8 million isn't even enough to keep Marchessault. $2.8 million is not enough to pay Nicholas Waugh. Understand the Vegas Golden Knights, guys like Chandler Stevenson, could ask for a pay raise. With the Vegas Golden Knights, Shea Theodore could ask for a pay raise. The reason why they are not out of cap hell yet in the Vegas Golden Knights is because they have a lot of players who want to get paid. The Vegas Golden Knights have a decent amount of players who want to get contract extensions, and $2.8 million is not enough. $2.8 million is not enough for the Vegas Golden Knights to sign everybody that they have to. So, once again, who do you go for? Who are the players that you let go of with the Vegas Golden Knights? Because I already told you in a segment on this show last week that, yes, you could buy out William Karlsson's contract. You could buy out William Karlsson and get back maybe $4 million. But $4 million, that gets you at 6.4. Is that enough? Hypothetically speaking, is $6.4 million enough to sign Marchessault and Waugh long term? I really want to play out the math here. You let go of William Karlsson, you save yourself $4 million. Congratulations. But how is that going to extend Jonathan Marchessault, who is going to want to get paid at least $8 million per year? How is that going to help Nicholas Waugh, who, keep in mind, is going to want to get paid around the $2.5 million mark? So, if you do let go of William Karlsson, then you will barely, and I mean just barely, get to enough money to sign Nicholas Waugh and to sign Jonathan Marchessault. But here's another problem. Keegan Kolesar is going to want to get paid. Brett Howden is going to want to get paid. Riley Smith, if you want to bring him back, well, he's going to have to get paid. Jake Bischoff, he's going to have to get paid. The problem that the Vegas Golden Knights have put themselves in is that they have so many good players and not enough money. The Vegas Golden Knights have so much talent, but not enough cap space. So, do you let go of Alec Martinez as well? Do you let go of an Alec Martinez, try to trade him for future considerations? Then maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Maybe, just maybe, the Vegas Golden Knights, after letting go of two quality players, will then have enough money to pay Nicholas Waugh, will have enough money to pay Jonathan Marchessault, will have enough money to pay Keegan Kolesar, will have enough money to pay Dylan Coghlan. Understand the Vegas Golden Knights are in a predicament that I just don't know if they're going to be able to survive. Now, we're going to be doing a trivia question here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. I was promoting this on our Facebook page, the Sports Angle on PR. I was promoting this earlier this week. I told you that I was going to have a trivia question that was going to be Vegas Golden Knights related. I said on this show, on our Facebook page, that I was going to have a trivia question that was meant for you guys. So, here is our trivia question for our fans. All right? Here is the trivia question for everybody here. All right? Jack Eichel has worn 2 numbers in his career. All right, Jack Eichel has worn 2 numbers in his career. 1 number with the Vegas Golden Knights and 1 number with the Buffalo Sabres. Can you name those numbers? Essentially, all I'm asking for is, can you name the jersey numbers that Jack Eichel has worn in his career? That is the trivia question for our Vegas segment. I just want to know if you know the 2 jersey numbers that Jack Eichel has worn in his career. It was a number he wore in his rookie season in Buffalo, and then there's the current jersey number he wears right now in Las Vegas. So when you got the answer to that question, comment down below. Go onto our Twitter page at Sports Angle on PR and let us know what the answer is. A trivia question once again. What are the 2 jersey numbers that Jack Eichel has worn in his career? We have 5 minutes left here on Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. So let's do our Vegas segment. Let's talk about all of the great sports that's going on here in Las Vegas. The Las Vegas Aviators, they have been having an interesting situation develop out there in Las Vegas. You have had some ups and downs. You've had all these things going on. So the Las Vegas Aviators, they're going to be at home. There's going to be all of these games that you could go out and see with the Las Vegas Aviators. I highly recommend to all of you, you go out, you support your Las Vegas Aviators, you go to Las Vegas Ballpark, and you watch the best AAA baseball stadium in all of minor league baseball. And their upcoming weekend on July 1st, they're going to have Top Gun Night at 7:05 p.m. on Friday, July 1st. They're going to have Top Gun Night. On Saturday, July 2nd, they're going to have post-game fireworks. And on 4th of July, they're going to have post-game fireworks, a special 6:05 game for Las Vegas. And for all the people who are wondering where you can find tickets for the Las Vegas Aviators, go to milb.com/Las Vegas, and you can find their schedule. You can find out their tickets. So it will be interesting to see with the Las Vegas Aviators. Go out and support your local Las Vegas team here in Las Vegas. They also lost a recent game against El Paso. They also won 13-4 in a doubleheader against them, so interesting to see there. So whether it's against Albuquerque on June 21st or when it's going up against the Salt Lake Bees, regardless of who they go up against in June and or July, go out and check out the Las Vegas Aviators. Go watch your local team. Now, when you talk about the WNBA, you have had the Las Vegas Aces, who have been putting out a phenomenal season. I want to give a shout out to the Las Vegas Aces. They won their most recent game, 92-84. They are 12-2 on the year, the best record in all of the WNBA. They have won 3 straight games. And I am happy to announce that the Las Vegas Aces, the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, we are going to be at their game on June 21st at 7 p.m. as the 11-2 Aces take on the 9-4 Chicago Sky. So the Chicago Sky, led by Candace Parker, They are going to be going to Las Vegas. They are going to be at the Michelob Ultra Arena. So that's going to be a fantastic game to watch. And the Sports Angle at PR Connections Radio will be at that game on June 21st at 7 p.m. So definitely that'll be a great game. We'll live tweet that game on Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. And somebody did answer the question, and you are correct. 15-9 is the numbers that Jack Eichel wore in his career. And I do think that this is just the start of a great career in Las Vegas for Jack Eichel. So go support your Las Vegas Aces. Go support your Las Vegas Aviators. And with us having 3 minutes left here on the show, I do have to mention one last detail with Las Vegas, and that is the fact that the Las Vegas Raiders, they are going to be building out something interesting, and I actually do love the fact that the Las Vegas Raiders, them doing this signing, them bringing in people is great. But I do have one last story to tell all of you with 2 minutes left here on the show, and that was 2 days ago. The Vegas Golden Knights, on behalf of Bill Foley, gave away $40,000 in gas at the Night Up Gas Up event partnered by Smith's. So on Wednesday, June 15th, if you had gone to Smith's, the Vegas Golden Knights, Bill Foley, he gave away $40,000 in gas on June 15th. So a round of applause to Bill Foley for giving back to the community, giving away $40,000 in gas in a partnership with Smith's. So shout out to Bill Foley. Want to give a quick attention to that. And I will say that Bill Foley is doing great part for the community. I applaud what Bill Foley has done. So we have 60 seconds left here on the Sports Angle. So go watch the PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. Go to their website. Go to their social media at PR Connections Radio. Voices of Humanity. We got the power. You name it. They have it here on PR Connections Radio. We also are going to have a new episode of the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio every Friday night, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. And until next time, have a great weekend, stay safe, and have a fantastic sports week. And this is us signing off, Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio with your host, Ian Rakelli.